Ladies and gentlemen, there is something undeniably captivating about a woman who has lived long enough to understand her own worth. A woman who walks into a room and doesn't need validation from the fleeting standards of beauty dictated by a culture obsessed with youth. She doesn't chase attention, she commands respect. And yet, so many older women fail to see the beauty in themselves because they are looking in the wrong mirror. They measure themselves against an impossible ideal, forgetting that real attractiveness is not found in the erasure of years, but in the depth those years have given them. You may not think you're attractive anymore. Society may have convinced you that beauty belongs only to the young. But let me tell you something, if you carry yourself with confidence, if you possess the quiet assurance of someone who has faced life and conquered it, you are far more striking than you realize. Beauty is not about perfection, it's about presence. There is an undeniable allure to a woman who has moved beyond the restless need for external validation and has instead cultivated an inner strength that radiates outward. The world may try to convince her that her best years are behind her, that beauty is a fleeting privilege reserved for the young. But this is not just wrong, it is profoundly misguided. A woman who has lived, who has endured, who has developed wisdom through experience, carries a depth of beauty that no youthful inexperience can replicate. There is a reason why those who truly understand attraction, those with depth themselves, are drawn to such women. It is not the mere appearance of youth that captivates, it is the rare combination of elegance, self-assurance, and grace under pressure that makes her truly magnetic. The essence of beauty changes with time. When a woman is young, much of her attractiveness is tied to physical traits: smooth skin, bright eyes, the kind of appearance that society idolizes. But the mistake that people make is assuming that this kind of beauty is the only one that matters. It isn't. What happens over time is an evolution, not a loss. The young woman may turn heads, but the older woman holds attention. She does not need to seek approval, she commands it. Why? Because her beauty is no longer just surface level, it has become multidimensional. It is not simply seen, it is felt. It is expressed in the way she speaks, in the quiet confidence of her gaze, in the way she listens with understanding that can only come from experience. This is why elegance matters more with age. Elegance is not about expensive clothing or a carefully curated appearance, it is about the way a woman carries herself. Have you ever noticed that the most captivating people in any room are not always the ones who fit the conventional definition of beauty? They are the ones who hold themselves with dignity, who move with purpose, who exude an unspoken certainty that they belong. This is why posture, poise, and presence become so critical as one ages. When a younger woman is uncertain of herself, it can be dismissed as naivety or charm. But an older woman with uncertainty, that becomes hesitation and erodes presence. The solution is not to chase after youth in a desperate attempt to conform to a standard that was never meant to last. The solution is to double down on the things that make a woman truly captivating beyond her years' refinement, certainty, and an unshakable understanding of her own worth. The reason many older women fail to see their own beauty is because they are measuring themselves against the past, rather than recognizing the evolution that has taken place. They look at old photographs and grieve what has been lost, rather than appreciating what has been gained. But the truth is, you were not meant to stay the same. The young woman you once were was incomplete, still forming, still learning. The woman you are now knows more, understands more, sees more, and that depth is immeasurably attractive. But it requires you to recognize it in yourself first, because the world only reflects back to you the confidence you project. If you walk through life believing you are past your prime, people will treat you accordingly. But if you walk through life with the quiet certainty that your presence alone is enough, you will find that others respond to that energy. An air of confidence that is not performative, a sense of self-assurance that is not fragile. This is why beauty in an older woman often has nothing to do with the symmetry of her features, but rather with the intensity of her presence. To become this kind of woman requires a shift in mindset. It requires stepping out of the cultural obsession with youth and realizing that value does not diminish with time, it deepens. It requires rejecting the false notion that a woman must remain forever young in order to remain desirable. Because the truth is, attraction is not about youth, it is about energy. And a woman who steps fully into who she is without hesitation, without apology, will always be captivating. There's something truly remarkable about a woman who has moved beyond the insecurity of youth and has come into full possession of her own identity. It's not just about confidence in the superficial sense, it's about a deeper, more profound self. This is why self-respect is so crucial. A woman who respects herself does not apologize for her age. She does not hide herself away, nor does she try to cling to youth in a way that betrays her own dignity. Instead, she leans into the strength that comes with experience. She understands that a face that has laughed, endured, and expressed the full range of human emotion carries a beauty that a blank, untouched canvas never could. She invests in herself not in the desperate attempt to look younger, but in the intentional effort to become the most refined, sophisticated version of who she is now. There is also something to be said about mystique. The older woman who understands her own attractiveness does not give everything away. She is not desperate for attention, nor does she engage in behaviors that screen for validation. She is selective with her presence, discerning with her time, and careful with her energy. And this makes her irresistibly compelling. People gravitate toward those who seem to possess something rare, assurance that comes from knowing who you are. And this, paradoxically, is one of the hardest things to see in oneself. When a woman doubts her own attractiveness, it's not because others don't see it. It's because she hasn't learned to recognize the power she already holds. The way she speaks, the way she carries herself, the way she listens and responds, all of these things create an aura that is far more compelling than mere youth or physical perfection. And the tragedy is that so many women fail to see it because they are looking in the wrong direction. There is a reason why certain women seem to command attention effortlessly, even in a crowded room. It's not always about their physical features. It's not about the shape of their face or the smoothness of their skin. It's about the way they make people feel. A woman who has cultivated depth, who has experienced life and come through the other side with grace rather than bitterness, possesses a kind of quiet magnetism that is difficult to define but impossible to ignore. And the key to this kind of magnetism is presence. When a woman is fully present, when she listens deeply, when she engages in conversation without the constant need for validation, she exudes an attractiveness that goes beyond the physical. People want to be around her because she is not trying to prove anything, she simply is. And yet, so many older women undermine themselves by chasing after a standard that does not even apply to them anymore. They compare themselves to younger women, forgetting that they are no longer in the same stage of life. They try to hold on to a past version of themselves instead of fully embracing the powerful transformation that has taken place. And this is where the real mistake is made. Because the truth is, an older woman who embraces her own evolution is infinitely more attractive than one who tries to cling to youth out of fear. There is no dignity in pretending to be something you are not. There is no strength in desperately seeking to rewind the clock. But there is immense beauty in a woman who stands firm in who she has become, who recognizes the unique value she now possesses. This is why certainty is so powerful. When a woman moves with certainty, when she speaks with conviction, when she holds herself with the quiet confidence of someone who knows her worth, people respond. There is an intensity to that kind of self-possession that cannot be ignored. And ironically, the women who doubt themselves the most are often the ones who possess the most of this hidden strength. They have simply not learned to recognize it. They look at their reflection and see only what time has taken, rather than what it has given. They fail to see the refinement, the depth, the elegance that has been carved into them by experience. Attractiveness is not about perfection. It is about intrigue. It is about the impression you leave on people after you've walked away. It is about the way you make others feel about themselves when they are around you. And this is something that only deepens with time. A young woman may captivate with beauty, but an older woman fascinates with depth. And fascination is a far greater force than mere attraction. A beautiful woman can turn heads, but a captivating woman holds attention. And the ability to hold attention through depth, through wisdom, through presence is something that only comes with experience. And so the real question is not whether a woman is still beautiful as she ages. The question is whether she has learned to see beyond conventional beauty and into the deeper forces that make a person truly attractive. Has she cultivated a presence that makes others feel seen and understood? Has she refined her ability to communicate in a way that draws people in? Has she developed a sense of certainty that makes others feel safe in her presence? These are the things that create lasting allure, the things that make a woman unforgettable. And they have nothing to do with the passage of time. She stops chasing validation and starts commanding respect. She stops apologizing for aging and starts embodying the strength that comes with it. And when that shift happens, when a woman truly accepts that her best years are not behind her, but are right now, she unlocks a kind of beauty that is no longer dependent on youth. Because real beauty is not about looking young. It is about looking alive. It is about being fully present, fully engaged, fully at home in yourself. And a woman who embodies that, who walks with certainty, who speaks with authority, who radiates an inner confidence that cannot be shaken, is a woman who will always be seen as beautiful, no matter her age. There's something deeply fascinating about how people perceive themselves, how they interpret the world's response to them, and how so often they fail to see what is right in front of them. The mind is not an impartial observer of reality, it is a filter. The problem is that so many women have been conditioned to fear aging, to see it as a loss rather than an evolution. They have been taught that their value diminishes with time, when in reality it is supposed to increase. But this requires a shift in thinking. It requires rejecting the idea that youth is the ultimate form of beauty. It requires stepping into a new phase of life with intention rather than resistance. And this is not easy. It is much easier to look backward, to hold on to what was, rather than to fully step into what is. But the moment a woman stops mourning the past and starts owning her present, she becomes magnetic. She no longer needs external validation because she has found internal certainty. And that certainty is what makes her irresistible. And so the real challenge is this: can a woman learn to see what others already see in her? Can she step fully into the presence she has spent decades cultivating? Can she stop waiting for permission to own her space, to take up room in the world, to speak and move with the authority of someone who knows exactly who she is? The moment she does, everything changes. A lens shaped by years of self-doubt, comparison, and internalized criticism. And this is particularly true when it comes to how a woman perceives her own attractiveness as she ages. She does not see herself as others do. She notices every small imperfection, every change, every tiny shift in how she looks, and she mistakenly assumes that the world sees her through the same harsh, scrutinizing lens. But this is not the case. Other people do not see the microscopic flaws she fixates on. What they see, what truly registers, is her presence, her demeanor, her confidence, the way she carries herself. That is what captivates. The problem is that many women have been conditioned to believe that their worth is tied to youth, that their attractiveness is something that inevitably fades with time. But this is a fundamentally flawed way of thinking. Attractiveness is not a number. It is not a metric that declines as the years pass. It is a function of how you exist in the world, how you engage with others, how much life you bring into the space around you. And a woman who understands this, who truly internalizes this, becomes a force to be reckoned with. She is no longer chasing an outdated standard of beauty. She is setting her own standard, one that is far more compelling, far more enduring. And here's where it gets interesting. Many women who assume they have lost their attractiveness are, in fact, far more compelling than they ever were in their youth. But they fail to recognize it because they are measuring themselves by the wrong standard. They compare themselves to their younger selves rather than to the reality of what makes a person truly attractive. And what makes a person attractive, it is not simply appearance, it is energy, it is presence. It is the ability to make others feel something when they are around you. And this is something that deepens, not diminishes, with time. There is a certain kind of beauty that comes only with experience, with wisdom, with having lived through things that have shaped and refined you. It is not the beauty of naivety, of youthful ignorance. It is the beauty of someone who has seen the world, who has understood its complexities, and who has chosen not to be embittered by it, but to be strengthened by it. And this kind of beauty, this depth, this presence creates a magnetism that younger women simply do not possess. It is why some women walk into a room and, without saying a word, command attention. Not because they are the youngest, not because they are the most conventionally attractive, but because they carry themselves with certainty. And certainty is infinitely more captivating than superficial perfection. The problem is that too many women diminish their own presence by apologizing for aging, by subtly signaling to the world that they believe they have lost something, that they are no longer as valuable as they once were. And the world, being incredibly perceptive, picks up on these signals. People take cues from how you see yourself. If you shrink, if you make yourself small, if you carry yourself as though you are lesser than you once were, then others will unconsciously respond in kind. They will see you as you see yourself. And that is the real tragedy, not the aging itself, but the internalized belief that aging is a loss rather than an evolution. And so the real question becomes, can a woman reframe the way she sees herself? Can she move beyond the outdated paradigm that equates beauty with youth and start to see the full power of what she has become? Can she understand that what makes her truly compelling is not whether she has the same features she had at 20, but whether she has cultivated the depth, the presence, the confidence that makes her unforgettable at 40, at 50, at 60? Because the truth is this: people are drawn to those who own their space in the world. They are drawn to those who exude self-possession, who do not seek constant validation, who do not apologize for existing. And this is where the true transformation happens. When a woman stops trying to fit into a mold that no longer applies to her, and instead steps fully into the role she was meant to play, she becomes irresistible. Not in the shallow, fleeting way that youth grants, but in a way that lingers in people's minds long after she has left the room. And this is what many women fail to see. They spend so much time lamenting what they believe they have lost, that they fail to recognize what they have gained. They do not see the effortless confidence that has replaced youthful insecurity. They do not see the way their presence has become more refined, more poised, more commanding. They do not see how their ability to navigate conversations, to hold attention, to make people feel truly seen, has made them more attractive than they ever were in their 20s. And that is the real tragedy, not that they have aged, but that they fail to see the power in what they have become. There is something profoundly unsettling about the way people diminish themselves, how they allow their self-perception to be dictated by standards that do not reflect reality. It is a quiet tragedy, one that unfolds in the mind, in the way a person carries themselves, in the subtle ways they shrink from the world. And for many women, especially as they age, this tragedy takes the form of self-doubt regarding their attractiveness, their desirability, their worth in the eyes of others. But the real issue is not age. It is perception. It is the inability to recognize that attractiveness is not merely a reflection in the mirror, but an embodied presence, something projected, something felt, something that resonates beyond the surface. There is a fundamental difference between how people see themselves and how others perceive them. The mind has a tendency toward harsh self-criticism, a focus on imperfections, a fixation on decline. This is why the shift in mindset is so crucial. A woman who understands her own value does not seek to prove her worth to others, she simply embodies it. She does not try to be seen, she knows she will be seen. And that knowing, that deep, unshakable certainty, is what makes her unforgettable. And so the next time you catch yourself wondering whether you are still attractive, whether people still notice you, whether you have lost some ineffable quality that once made you magnetic, ask yourself this instead: am I fully stepping into my own presence? Am I carrying myself with the certainty of someone who knows her worth? Or am I subtly signaling to the world that I believe I am no longer enough? Because how you see yourself will determine how others see you. And if you choose to step fully into the woman you have become, without apology, without hesitation, without looking back, then you will begin to realize something profound. Your most powerful, most captivating years are not behind you. They are right now. But the world does not scrutinize in the same way. People do not analyze every detail of another's appearance the way an individual does with their own. Instead, they respond to energy, to confidence, to the way someone makes them feel. And that, more than anything else, is what defines true attractiveness. It is not about meeting an arbitrary standard, it is about possessing an undeniable presence. Many women fail to realize this. They have been conditioned to believe that beauty is tied to youth, that their peak desirability is confined to a brief window of time, and that everything beyond that is a slow, inevitable decline. But this is an illusion, a deeply flawed narrative that ignores the reality of what makes a person truly compelling. If it were only youth that mattered, why are some young people utterly forgettable while others command attention? Why do some women in their 40s and 50s walk into a room and immediately draw the eyes of everyone present? It is because attraction is not a single variable equation. It is not simply about youth. It is about presence, about how rooted a person is in themselves. This is the fundamental misunderstanding. So many women believe they need to look younger to be attractive. But what they really need is to own their presence, to stand fully in their own identity without apology, without hesitation, without seeking external validation. Because when they do that, when they stop pleading for approval and start embodying self-worth, everything changes. People perceive them differently. They command attention not through effort, but through certainty. And certainty is far more compelling than mere appearance. So why do so many fail to recognize this? Because it is far easier to buy into the illusion that youth is the only currency of value than it is to do the deeper work of cultivating presence, of developing a personality that draws people in, of stepping into a level of confidence that does not rely on external validation. It is easier to believe that aging is a decline than to reframe it as an evolution, as a deepening of character, as a refinement of the things that make a person truly unforgettable. And that is where the real shift happens. What happens as a person ages, if they are paying attention, if they are growing in wisdom rather than collapsing under insecurity, is that they begin to carry themselves with a deeper knowing. They become less desperate for approval, less reactive to superficial validation, more aligned with what truly matters. And this shift, this internal solidity, is what creates a kind of magnetism that no amount of youth can replicate. But the tragedy is that many women never allow themselves to step into this power. They resist aging rather than embracing the strength that comes with it. They internalize a narrative of loss rather than one of evolution. They compare themselves to a younger version of themselves rather than recognizing the unique value they have cultivated. And in doing so, they rob themselves of their own presence, of their own undeniable allure. Because the truth is this: people do not respond merely to what you look like. They respond to how you inhabit your own skin. They respond to how you carry yourself, to whether you walk through the world as though you belong, as though you have something to offer, as though you do not need permission to take up space. The moment a woman stops comparing herself to her younger self, stops measuring herself against arbitrary standards, stops doubting the reality of her own presence, she steps into something infinitely more powerful than youth. She steps into commanding attention without needing to ask for it. And that is a rare and irresistible quality. Because think about this: have you ever met someone who was not traditionally attractive, who did not fit the conventional mold, and yet they exuded something magnetic, something undeniable? What was that? It was certainty. It was the way they inhabited themselves fully, without apology, without shrinking. And that is what makes the real difference. The women who attract, who compel, who are remembered, are not always the youngest or the most conventionally beautiful. They are the ones who own their space in the world. They are the ones who do not diminish themselves out of fear that they are no longer enough. They are the ones who stand in their own value and refuse to question it. And the irony, that kind of self-possession, that kind of unwavering certainty, is what makes them more attractive than they ever were in their youth. It is what makes them unforgettable, not just to men, but to everyone around them. It is why some women walk into a room and immediately shift the energy, not because they are seeking attention, but because they do not need it. And that paradoxically is what draws it to them. So the real question is not whether you are still attractive. The real question is whether you are standing fully in your own presence. Because when you do, when you stop waiting for permission to be seen, when you stop measuring yourself against an outdated standard, when you embrace the power that comes with experience, you become something far more compelling than someone who is merely young. You become someone who is undeniable. And that is something that no amount of time can take away. There is something profoundly transformative about a woman who has learned to carry herself with quiet confidence, a woman who has stopped seeking permission to exist fully. They do not gravitate toward the most symmetrical face or the most flawless figure. They respond to something deeper, something that radiates from within, something that cannot be faked or imitated. They respond to certainty, to a sense of purpose, to a way of moving through the world that does not seek approval, that does not beg for validation, that does not require permission to be seen. And that is what separates those who are merely pleasant to look at from those who command attention. The difference is vast, because one is passive, it is dependent on others noticing, on others approving. The other is active, it imposes itself on the world. It does not wait to be recognized. It does not shrink to accommodate. It does not apologize for existing. And that is what makes all the difference. But the problem is that so many people, especially as they grow older, begin to retreat. They become invisible by choice, not because they lack beauty, but because they stop embodying their presence. They begin to move through the world as if they are taking up too much space, as if they are somehow unworthy of being noticed. And this is the true tragedy, not aging itself, not the passing of time, but the slow erosion of confidence, the gradual retreat into the background, the surrendering of one's own right to be seen. And yet there are those who refuse to do this. There are those who, despite the expectations placed upon them, step forward rather than back, who embrace their experience rather than mourn the passing of youth, who understand that what they bring to the world now, in this moment, is far more valuable than what they once brought in the past. And those women, those individuals, are the ones who remain magnetic, who continue to draw people in, who are never truly forgotten. Because think about this: when you walk into a room, what do people notice first? It is not the absence of wrinkles. It is not the exact shape of a person's features. It is their energy, their posture, the way they carry themselves, the way they engage with the world without hesitation. And that is something that has nothing to do with age. It has nothing to do with how closely a person aligns with conventional standards. It has everything to do with whether or not they still believe in their own presence. And that is the real key belief, because people take their cues from you. If you move through the world as though you are no longer worth noticing, they will believe you. If you hesitate, if you second guess, if you shrink, they will accept that as truth. But if you move with the certainty that you deserve to be seen, that you have something to offer, that you are still incredibly, undeniably present, then that is what they will believe as well. And that is the secret that so many people fail to understand. The world does not decide your worth for you. You decide it for yourself. You set the tone. You establish the frame. And if you carry yourself with a quiet, unshakable conviction that you are still someone who commands attention, then that is exactly how you will be perceived. But that kind of confidence does not happen by accident. It must be chosen. It must be cultivated. It must be defended against the voices, both internal and external, that will try to convince you otherwise. It requires a kind of rebellion, a refusal to submit to the narrative that says you are no longer as valuable, that you are no longer as seen, that your presence no longer matters, because nothing could be further from the truth. And the irony of it all is that when a person steps fully into this mindset, they become more attractive than they ever were in their youth. Because youth, for all its advantages, often lacks certainty. It lacks depth. It lacks the kind of presence that is forged through experience. And that is why a person who has truly come into themselves, who has shed the need for approval, who has decided that they will be fully present in the world without apology, is infinitely more compelling than someone who has nothing but youth on their side to express herself without hesitation. It is a rare thing, and perhaps that is why it is so compelling. Because for too long, too many people, especially women, have been conditioned to diminish themselves, to pull back, to hesitate, to second-guess their worth. They have internalized the idea that beauty is a fleeting thing, that desirability is something that exists on a timeline, that their value is somehow measured against a standard that they had no hand in setting. But what happens when that illusion is shattered? What happens when a person wakes up one day and decides that they will no longer entertain the doubt, that they will no longer measure themselves according to arbitrary expectations? That is when something truly remarkable takes place. That is when a woman steps into a kind of power that is undeniable. And here's the thing, it has very little to do with conventional beauty. It has very little to do with meeting someone else's definition of attractiveness. It has everything to do with presence, with energy, with the way a person inhabits themselves. Because people do not respond to perfection. Because at the end of the day, people do not remember what you look like. They remember how you made them feel. They remember the force of your presence, the weight of your energy, the certainty with which you moved through the world. And that is why the most compelling, the most magnetic, the most undeniably attractive people are not necessarily the youngest or the most conventionally beautiful. They are the ones who have stepped fully into their own identity. They are the ones who do not seek permission to take up space. They are the ones who own themselves completely. And that is something that no amount of time can take away. The truth is, people will only perceive you as valuable when you perceive yourself as valuable. This is not some abstract, feel-good sentiment. It is a fundamental principle of human interaction. People take their cues from you. They are constantly observing, subconsciously assessing whether you believe in your own worth, whether you carry yourself with the conviction of someone who deserves attention, respect, admiration. And when you fail to recognize your own presence, when you retreat into the background of your own life, you signal to others that you are not someone who needs to be taken seriously. But that is a tragedy. And worse than that, it is a lie. Because so many people, particularly as they age, begin to buy into the notion that they are somehow becoming less. That because their face is not as smooth or their body not as youthful, they are fading into irrelevance. That their time in the spotlight is over. That they should step aside for the next generation. That their presence no longer carries the weight it once did. But what an incredibly destructive idea. What an insidious, corrosive narrative. Because it is precisely at this stage in life, when a person has gathered wisdom, experience, depth, that they are most compelling. The difference between those who remain magnetic as they age and those who do not is not in their genetics, their skincare routine, or their exercise regimen. It is in their belief in their own presence. It is in their refusal to shrink. It is in their rejection of the idea that their best days are behind them. Because the moment a person decides that they are no longer worth noticing, that is the moment they begin to disappear. Not physically, of course, but psychologically, socially, energetically, and other people taking their cues from this subtle withdrawal respond in kind. And that is the great irony. The moment a person stops trying to prove their worth, the moment they stop seeking external validation, is often the very moment they become the most attractive, the most powerful, the most undeniable. Because there is nothing more compelling than someone who has fully inhabited themselves. Nothing more captivating than a person who is no longer looking around for permission to exist as they are. Think about the people you found most magnetic in your life. Were they the most conventionally beautiful? Were they the ones who desperately tried to hold on to their youth to fit into an impossible standard? Or were they the ones who owned themselves completely, who moved through the world with a kind of quiet certainty, who did not need to be reassured of their value because they had already accepted it as truth? That is what people respond to. That is what lingers in their minds long after you leave the room. The energy you carry, the conviction behind your presence, the refusal to apologize for taking up space. And yet, so many people spend their lives waiting for someone to validate them, waiting for permission to be seen. And when you truly understand this, when you internalize it, when you begin to live it, everything changes. The way people look at you changes. The way they interact with you changes. Because they can sense it. They can sense when a person is fully alive, fully aware of their own significance, fully engaged with the world around them. And they respond to it instinctively. Because at the end of the day, people do not remember the superficial. They do not remember how perfectly you fit into some arbitrary standard. They remember how you carried yourself. They remember how they felt in your presence. They remember whether or not you believed in your own worth. Because that belief is contagious. It spreads. It alters the way people see you, the way they treat you, the way they remember you. So do not wait for someone else to grant you this power. Do not wait for external validation. Do not buy into the narrative that you are becoming invisible, that your time is up, that you are no longer someone who deserves to be noticed. That is a lie. And the sooner you recognize it as a lie, the sooner you will reclaim what was always yours to begin with. Waiting for proof that they are still relevant. But what if that moment never comes? What if no one grants you that validation? What if the only way to reclaim your own presence is to step forward first, to establish yourself, to decide that you are still someone who demands attention, who deserves to be taken seriously, who will not disappear just because the world tells them they should? That is the only way to win this game. That is the only way to break free from the constraints that have been placed upon you. Because confidence is not something that is given, it is something that is taken. It is something that must be chosen. It is something that must be reinforced every single day through action, through posture, through the way you present yourself to the world. And it is not about arrogance. It is not about dominance. It is about presence, about standing firm in your own reality, about recognizing that you are not done yet, that you still have something to offer, that you will not be made small by the passing of time. Because beauty is not about perfection. Attraction is not about age. Presence is not about meeting someone else's definition of worthiness. It is about how fully you inhabit yourself. It is about the certainty with which you move through the world. It is about the refusal to apologize for your own existence, and that is something that no one can take from you. Not time, not society, not anyone. It is yours, and it always has been. The only question is, will you own it? At the end of the day, how you see yourself dictates how the world sees you. If you believe you are fading, others will treat you as though you are. But if you stand firm in your presence, if you refuse to shrink, if you carry yourself with the confidence of someone who knows their worth, people will respond in kind. Beauty, magnetism, and presence are not about fitting into an external mold. They are about owning yourself fully, unapologetically. And the moment you decide to step into that power, everything changes.